Tatiana Schlossberg says that she is dying at age 35 from a very severe form of blood cancer. I have now brought another tragedy into her life and the lives of our family, and I can't stop it. The room was dead silent as Tatiana Schlossberg's funeral took place. It was full of memories, sadness, and unspoken history. The mourners were hoping for custom, restraint, and quiet tears. Instead, George Moran spoke up and said things that broke people's hearts and made them cry. His voice shook and then stopped, letting out secrets and feelings that had been hidden for a long time. People's faces dropped, their hands got tight, and they started to cry. The weight of the moment hit them. The air felt changed for good. With what he said, a goodbye became a moment that no one will ever forget. Farewell. Talked. In love. Not silence. George Moran stood where no husband ever wants to stand on January 5, 2026. Tatiana Schlossberg had been by his side through good times and bad. Now, he stood in front of a room full of memories, sadness, and hope, trying to find the words to say goodbye. But what happened next was not what anyone was expecting. George didn't ask for the room to fall apart with sadness. He didn't make people cry just because he could. From behind the stage, he didn't fall apart. Instead, he asked them in a kind way to remember how Tatiana lived. He told them to laugh when they could, do crossword puzzles, and be there for each other as friends, because those little things were very important to her. When things should have broken him, he found the strength to honor her the way she would have wanted. Tatiana Schlossberg had never been known by her last name alone. She was a Kennedy, yes. But she left behind a quieter and more personal impact. It showed up in her interest, her kindness, and the way she noticed things other people missed. George didn't just talk about loss when he spoke. He talked about how their love was formed by daily habits, inside jokes, and a life they built together. Everyone there knew they weren't just hearing a funeral speech. There was a unique kind of goodbye going on. One that would stay with them after everyone left the church. There was a heavy echo in the room itself. The Manhattan Street Ignatius Loyola Church wasn't just another place to hold the event. It was the same church where Jacqueline Kennedy had been baptized, taken her first communion, and said her prayers of faith. She died there in May 1994 from cancer at the age of 64. It was also the site of her burial. After more than 30 years, her granddaughter was being remembered in the same place. It seemed like history had gone around and around again because of the harmony. The room was heavy, not just with sadness, but also with the weight of a family whose story has always been important and painful. As more people showed up, the mood changed even more. Caroline Kennedy walked in with her husband Edwin. Her face was calm, but sad. Jack and Rose, Tatiana's brothers, came after quietly. Each person deals with the loss in their own quiet way. Then there was a moment that seemed to break the room apart. George walked in with their two young children, Edwin, who was 3 years old, and Josephine, who was only 18 months old. They were too young to understand what was going on and too small to fully understand what the meeting was all about, but their presence spoke louder than any words. They were living pieces of Tatiana, and everyone knew that when they grew up, they would have stories instead of memories. The service was both formal and highly personal at the same time. It wasn't cold or far away. Instead of shaking hands, people hugged. When people were sad, they grew closer to each other, reducing the distance between important people and private mourners. President Joe Biden and Jill Biden were sitting there. Their being there said a lot. There were Nancy Pelosi, Michael Bloomberg, David Letterman, and Seth Meyers in the seats, all of them sitting quietly. A fashion designer named Carolina Herrera was also there. She made Tatiana's wedding dress, which gave the day even more meaning. The past seemed to blend into the present everywhere you looked. George was at the heart of it all. His words stood out not because they were dramatic, but because they were honest, calm, and based on love. But what if George's quiet words were more important than the president being there? Did love, not power, really rule that room that day? Watch out. It was time for my husband to say goodbye. George Moran walked into the light that came in through the stained glass windows of St. Ignatius Loyola Church. The faint sounds of condolences being whispered behind him. He stopped for a moment, letting the silence in the room make him wait. And shaking with sadness, gather around him. He had his hands lightly on the podium, but he felt like he had to hold back a storm that he couldn't quite name. He held his little sister Josephine's hand next to him. She was too young to fully understand what was going on, but she was there to hold him in the life they had built together. George knew at that moment that he had to talk for more than just himself. It was his job to speak for Tatiana. "Tatiana, I never thought I'd be standing here without you." His voice was low and steady as he spoke. "Still, I'm here because life is mean. You, too, were too smart to stay. The world will miss you every day because you left us too soon." He took a swallow and looked around the room. At his side, Edwin held his little sister close. Friends, strangers, and people who had only heard about her brilliance in passing had come because they knew, just like he did, that she had been really great. "But I don't want you to be alone when you think about her. I don't want you to hide your sadness and never talk about her again." Tatiana, she was living all the time, even all the little ones. She laughed so hard at crossword problems that it was like a challenge to her. She could get through them quickly and still find time to help someone, smile at them, or just listen to them. She thought that people should enjoy life to the fullest. She was fiercely and kindly, and she still is. George looked down at Josephine and Edwin, who were the quiet proof that her life was still going on. Her mother made the everyday special. She made the 8 p.m. Everything she did, from bad haircuts to fights over ginger ale to spilled milk, became something worth noticing. When she gave birth, she faced life's cruelest truths with courage, humor, and respect. I liked that about her. That's what made her stand out. He took a moment to feel the weight of her absence in the seats. Please do something for her and me. Don't just think of her. Do what she did. Laugh out loud. Enjoy solving puzzles. Be there for your friends when they're having a bad time at 2 o'clock in the morning. Pay attention. Tell the truth. Show up. Be brave. Kindness. That's how you move her forward. That's how you show her respect. Tatiana didn't waste any time in her life. She would never want you to waste your time by being sad about her without doing anything. He closed his eyes for a moment and felt a tremor go through him. His chest tightened. I loved her so much that words can't describe it. Every day of my life, I will show our kids and everyone who knew her what it meant to love deeply. I'll tell them how sharp and quickly she saw the world. And fun. About how she made family, friends, and outsiders feel seen, heard, and safe. The life of Tatiana was a gift. It is very sad that she has died, but her heritage is ours to bring forward. His voice was clearer and stronger now that he raised his head. So don't leave this church empty when you leave today. Bring her along. Have faith in her. Take her laugh away. Take her love. Do things that would make her happy. And she won't really be gone if you do that. She will be with you every time you laugh, do something nice, or live each moment to the fullest, just like she was. George let his tears fall freely for the first time. The room held its breath as he reached out and grabbed Edwin and Josephine. Tatiana was more than just Kennedy's granddaughter, a reporter, or the granddaughter of a president. She was also a wife and mother. That no one else could take their place. George's words made everyone in the room feel like she was there again, living, fierce, and laughing, even though she wasn't there. What question did you hear as George spoke? How could a quiet love move leaders to tears and bring strangers together as a family? Watch out for now. Love in the middle of what seems impossible. On the morning of January 5th, George Moran went back to the stage at St. Ignatius Loyola Church with a clear head and a stronger voice. His hands were steady, but his heart was heavy. He was ready to say the words that had been living in him since Tatiana Schlossberg was diagnosed. The air was thick with expectation, and the pews were full. But George didn't want to impress, he wanted to respect. He saw leaders, reporters, friends, and family across the room. But especially at Edwin and Josephine, whose little faces looked a lot like those of their mother, who they would barely remember. He took a moment to let the weight of the silence rest on him. Tatiana wrote about the big day in her life once. He said slowly and in a low voice, November 22, 2025. That's the date her grandfather was shot in Dallas 62 years ago. She talked about swimming a mile the day before she was diagnosed and how strong and healthy she felt. Unstoppable, and all of a sudden there was cancer. That's how things turn around. The words echoed through the church like soft thunder. George gave the thought some space before going on. After that day, there was no time to think or be scared. There was only treatment, chemo, immunotherapy, and bone marrow donations. I can't explain how she fought bravely at every step. Rose, her sister, did everything she could. Jack still tried. They did every test that clinical studies could give them. Hope all the time. Still, she was not ready for what scared her the most, the children. When George looked at Edwin and then at Josephine, the room seemed to get smaller around him. He said in a broken voice, she carried their faces inside her eyelids. She saw them every time she closed her eyes, but she knew they wouldn't remember her. Flashes could happen to Edwin. Josephine. Picture only. She never got to feed her, bathe her, or change her diaper. The fight that began the day she gave birth was the beginning and end of her life. And the guilt was too much to bear. No one spoke in the crowd. George didn't stop to make a point. He just told it like it was. She wasn't by herself, though. I was always with her. I called the doctors when she didn't want to talk to them and took care of her insurance. It was so cold that she slept on the floor of her hospital room every night. When the drugs made her mad, I didn't argue. It was Canada Dry, not Schweppes. I knew it wasn't about ginger ale. It was fear, pain, and losing charge. And I worked hard every day to make my life feel normal. She told me that love is a word, a choice, and a choice. George took a moment to let the people in the church hear how personal his words were. He said it softly, with a sad little smile on his face. She called me a genius, she said. Smart, funny, and nice. When life stops being beautiful and gets real, be kind in ways that matter. She said it's great if you can marry a doctor, but not everyone can. People were broken by that line because it wasn't just about helping, it was about staying alive. It was about giving her the strength to keep going when everything else seemed to have stopped. The room shook as George's voice got a little higher. We got married on Martha's Vineyard on September 9, 2017, a beautiful fall day. Not sensational or flashy, just real us. Every day after that, we lived a lifetime together, even though she had a cancer that no one should have to deal with, especially a mother. I tried to save her but failed. Like hell, because loving her was a choice I would make 1,000 times over. He looked out at the crowd, steadying himself. This is what makes her story different, he said, voice rich with meaning. Not the awards, not the Yale degrees, not the books or the essays, though they were remarkable. It's the love. It's how you show up when someone can't do it alone. It's how we carry forward, through the children, through our actions, through laughter. Through kindness, through life itself. Tatiana asked us all to be better, to live faster, to love harder, and we will, because that is how she lives on. The room was silent, yet charged. Every heart held her in that moment, and George, standing tall in unimaginable grief, made the audience understand what it truly meant to love through the worst, and to keep moving, even when everything feels impossible. How did one man's quiet words turn unbearable grief into a promise of living on through love, children, and courage? Stay. A love that lived in every moment. George Moran stood before the congregation, his eyes tracing the faces in the pews, but always returning to the children, Edwin and Josephine. His voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of a lifetime compressed into too few years. Tatiana. He began, was not just brilliant, not just a Kennedy, not just a journalist or a writer. She was a mother. She was a wife. She was a force of life and care in every moment. And even when the world turned against her, when cancer tried to claim her too soon, she was thinking of others, always others. He paused, letting the room breathe with him. She wrote once in the New Yorker on November 22, 2025. The same day her grandfather was shot in Dallas, 62 years earlier, she swam a mile that morning, felt strong, healthy, unstoppable, and then, in a heartbeat, she was a patient. She faced treatment immediately. Chemo, immunotherapy, bone marrow transplants, and every step of the way, her thoughts were of our children, of the life she wanted them to know, of the time she would never get back with them. George's hand rested lightly on the podium as he continued. She worried about Edwin seeing only flashes of her, about Josephine knowing her only in photographs. She never got to bathe them, feed them, or change their diapers. Her life became a war for survival the moment she left the delivery room. And still, she never let the fear, the pain, the injustice of it, steal her care, her attention, her love. The audience leaned in as George's voice softened. I slept on the hospital floor beside her, night after night. While she fought harder than anyone should ever have to when the steroids made her angry. Only Canada Dry, not Schweppes. I did not argue. I understood. I knew it wasn't about ginger ale. It was fear, pain, losing control of everything. And through it all, she continued to be the kindest person I have ever known. She called me a genius. Yes, handsome, funny, but she always said I was kind in kindness. That is what mattered most when life stops being romantic and starts being real. He looked down at Edwin and Josephine, small and fragile in their seats, and his voice broke just enough to carry the truth of every sleepless night, every unspoken worry. Tatiana did not just fight for herself, he said. She fought for us, for our family, for the future. Even in the darkest days, she loved fiercely, fought boldly, and carried hope. As if it were a weapon against the impossible. She was brave enough to call out wrongs, even from those closest to her, even when she knew it might cost her peace. She did not flinch. She did not compromise her honesty. And yet, she never forgot her children, never forgot the small moments, the love that lived in the ordinary. George inhaled slowly, holding the audience with him. We married on September 9, 2017 on Martha's Vineyard. Not for the cameras, not for the headlines, but for us. She wore lace, delicate, simple, designed by Carolina Herrera, and I wore a soft gray suit and pastel tie. We were quiet together, yet powerful in the life we built. Every photograph, every memory, every touch of that day now carries a weight I cannot put into words because it shows the joy we had in the life that cancer tried to steal too soon. His eyes swept across the church again. Tatiana gave her life to love, to care, to protect, and to fight. She gave her life to Edwin, to Josephine, to me, to the people around her, to the truth she would not compromise. And while I could not save her, I can honor her by sharing her care, her brilliance, her courage, her heart. That is how she lives on, with us. In every act of love, in every moment, we choose to be kind. In every fight we face with courage. That is the gift she left behind, and it is ours to carry forward. The congregation held their breath, not just for grief, but for the clarity, the truth, and the magnitude of what George had revealed. This wasn't a sad goodbye. That was proof of love that was so full and real that it was hard not to feel it and carry it on. What did George say in that last moment of suffocating silence that turned sadness into purpose and changed the church forever? Join us. The road map for love and bravery. George Moran looked out into the crowd and his eyes fell on Edwin and Josephine's little sweet faces. He spoke slowly, letting each word carry the weight of the woman he loved with all his heart. He started by saying that Tatiana was more than smart. Our family loved her very much. You can't put a price on how much she cared, not with awards or praise, but with every small act of love she did, even in the hospital and during the fight she didn't want. She first thought about other people. He stopped for a moment and looked at the kids, then at his family and friends. On November 22, 2025, the same day her grandpa was shot in Dallas, she wrote for The New Yorker. 62 years ago. She talked about being shocked that she was facing cancer one day after swimming a mile and feeling like she could do anything. There was only treatment, no time to think or be scared. Chemotherapy, immunotherapy, bone marrow donations, and hope that was too good to be true. But what scared her the most was that Edwin and Josephine would forget all about her. About the times she would never be able to share. Even though George's voice was strong, it shook just enough to show that he was filled with so much grief that it could drown a lifetime. She never got to feed them, bathe them, or rock them to sleep the way every mother dreams. In the blink of an eye, her life went from the birth room to getting the news. But she still cared back then. She cared about us and everyone else who came into her life. And I tried to share that care with her. I called her when she couldn't. I took care of the doctors, the insurance, and all the changes she didn't have time for. Every night I slept on the floor next to her because she taught me that love is a word, not a feeling. It is a choice and an action that never ends. He let the people in the room feel how brave she was. She screamed when the drugs made her mad, but only in Canada. I didn't fight back. Yes, I got it. It wasn't about juice. She was scared, in pain, and losing control, but she stayed kind, smart, funny, and strong. Even after getting sick, she fought for our family with focus, grace, and love. She said I was smart, good-looking, and funny, but most of all, she said I was nice. When life stopped being magical and became real, that word, that truth, became important. George couldn't take his eyes off of her, even though they were crying. We got married in Martha's Vineyard on September 9, 2017. Not flashy, not for everyone, just real. Tatiana wore lace that was made by Carolina Herrera. I wore a soft gray suit with a peach tie. We were calm, but our love shone through more than words ever could. Every picture didn't record style or history, but presence. And a few months before she died, the last family picture shows her looking straight at the camera, her eyes bright, her calm confidence still there. She is holding Josephine while Edwin leans into her and I, just staring at her, seeing the light that never went out in her. When people saw that picture, they were shocked because she didn't look sick or like she was ready for war. Life and love only. He paused once more, letting the truth sink in like a heavy rock. Tatiana lived a fierce, honest, and shameless life. No matter who was wrong, even her family, she spoke out against it. Even as she was dying. She fought for science, moms, and people who didn't have power. But she still cared about the kids even then. Even when the world tried to take her away, her love for them never changed. She wrote about everything, leaving clues for me and us so that her care would never stop. So her kids would never really be without her heart or her advice. George turned his head to look at everyone and let his words challenge and move them. So I ask you all to live her, not just remember her. Don't be afraid to help others, tell the truth, be kind all the time, do crossword problems, think quickly, and love deeply. Be the kind of person Tatiana would have liked to laugh with. That's how we honor her. That's how we move her forward. That's how we get through her going. It was felt by everyone in the church. This wasn't a normal funeral service. This was her life plan, made by a guy who loved her so much, lived with her so fully, and wouldn't let her light fade. George Moran didn't just say goodbye. He taught everyone how to love, be brave, and care for others. He also reminded us that the best memories are not written in history books, but lived in hearts. What do you think made George Moran's goodbye so memorable? His sadness, her strength, or the kid's quiet presence that spoke louder than words? Leave your ideas in the comments. Don't forget to share, like, and follow.